The story that Tom gave about the people who have two jobs reminded me of a great story, true story, that is in the lore of Seton Hall University. Seton Hall University had a man who was their president by the name of McLaughlin, Monsignor McLaughlin, who at the time was also rector of the seminary. And different from the situation that Tom experienced, and we're all grateful to the associate director that was different. But once he wrote, the rector wrote to the president of the university asking for permissions, and the president turned him down. The fact that it was the same man in each case was very interesting, but he was able to have a certain ability to get over those personal feelings of friendship that he might have had with the rector, and said, no, you cannot do this, and I won't give you the money for it. So, but on a more serious note, and if I may, I'm eating up all my time, unfortunately, but Tom's beautiful story about St. Margaret Mary it reminded me, as I was preaching to the seminarians this morning in New Jersey, and I reminded them that Margaret Mary, when she was receiving these extraordinary visions, the visions of our Lord in the apparition of the Sacred Heart, and the Lord telling her about his suffering, about his love, and Margaret Mary becoming so unnerved by these extraordinary happenings, and no one in the monastery was able to help her. The superiors didn't know how to help her. The fellow religious couldn't help her. And she finally went to the Lord and she said, Lord, I can't handle this. I can't handle this. You are so good to me. You're giving me all this information, but I don't know how to handle it. No one to help me. And the Lord said to her, this is wonderful, I love this story. The Lord said to her, okay, I understand. And I will send you a priest who will be for you a wonderful counselor, because he is for me my perfect friend. And it was Saint Claude de la Colombière, a Jesuit, who became her director. And but just to think of that, I always think of that, the Lord saying of someone, this is my perfect friend. Of course, that's what we're all supposed to be, his perfect friend. So hopefully, by the time I finish my talk today, you'll all be, because of your patience with me, more perfectly the friends of the Lord. I want to thank Tom for his kind words. I happily, he said about my pastoral abilities. I'm not sure that's true. I may not be the right person to talk about the parish. I only spent 2 years as an associate pastor. I was never a pastor. But I did spend 30 years as a bishop, and 25 of those as the ordinary of diocese, where you become so involved with parishes in a very special way. It was my custom always to get to Mass in a different parish every day when I was an ordinary. I'd have a chance to offer Mass with the people, to preach with them, and to meet them after church, and then to have breakfast with the priest. So it gave me a real understanding, I think, of what the parish situation was in the three dioceses that I was privileged to serve. So maybe that will help. Hopefully I can say something useful. Retirement has been a disaster for me because I haven't been able to say no, including to Tom when he asked me if I would come and give this talk today. I almost was in Jerusalem yesterday just for 12 hours, but thank God I didn't have to go, and I'm happy to be with you all today. I've called this talk a MegaChurch or Storefront, the parish of the future. And I guess it's like telling people at the end of the movie before it starts, but I will do that. It probably, according to me, probably has to be a bit of both. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to fulfill all the things that we and the Lord would want it to be. Let's talk about a megachurch. Today, about 12, 15 miles outside of Washington, on Route 5, which goes down to southern Maryland, you pass a stretch of about maybe 3 miles, where there are 6 megachurches. These are huge buildings. They look like warehouses or like Egyptian monuments or something like that. they're well built architecturally and with all kinds of parking lots that I guess as large as you would have for a stadium. And in there is a megachurch. They are part theater, I think you'd have to say, and the ones who run them would say that's part of the importance of what they do, and part religious community. They all have a master preacher, at least one, usually just one, who is the focus and the center of all that they do. They have great light shows and wonderful music, sometimes an orchestra, more often a couple of choirs, all dressed with robes and garlands and using all kinds of music as the service goes. They usually would have only one long service a day because they do have so many people. They probably have a daycare center, all of them. One of them I know has shops where you get religious goods of all kinds, and even a restaurant, so that you can make it a full day of going to the megachurch, and you can get spiritual nourishment there. And I'm sure there are many who are helped enormously by the spiritual nourishment that they receive there. For us, unfortunately, many of them are Catholics who are enthralled by the music and by the master preacher and by the light shows and by the commitment to the Lord that they all are supposed to make. Whether they are able to grow in that commitment because of ongoing religious education or not, I'm not sure. But this is what they do, and they are very, 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 very popular. The Washington Post, when he defines a megachurch, says that it is a church where 2,000 people go to Mass at one time, go to the service at one time. On the other hand, I'd want to say for our own benefit, between Washington and Arlington, the diocese on the other side of the Potomac River, we would have at least 20 places where, not at one Mass, because we're not built that way, but where you would have 4,000 and 5,000 people on a Sunday coming to the Masses beginning Saturday evening and going through the Masses of the day. So when people say, oh, a megachurch is so much more important, you have them too. I'm sure you have them in Boston also, where you have thousands of people coming to Mass and being a Eucharistic group. So that's the megachurch. I was, as Tom mentioned, the vicar of the Harlems for a while, Spanish Harlem and Black Harlem, and they were wonderful, wonderful areas of great, great people. But you walk down some of the corridors, some of the thoroughfares, rather, of the Harlems, and on one street you might meet 6 storefront churches. They are small. They may be half a dozen on every block. They're in neighborhoods of minorities or different racial groups, and they're neighborhoods of the poor. There are many migrants, many immigrants taking their religious nourishment from these storefront churches. A lot of them are holiness churches, Pentecostal churches, charismatic churches, where people are baptized in the Spirit. They are some of them are filled to overflowing, and some of them just will have a half a dozen people. But they survive because of extraordinary tithing that these folks do. Extraordinary willingness to keep this little storefront alive, because they find in it a small community that is the blessing for them. It's something that they need to keep themselves going. Not the great mega church where there may be 5,000 people gathered together, but a church where there might be 20 or 30 people, all of whose name you know, and their lives you know. And they share with you, and they share because of tremendous generosity with the church that is located there. Sometimes, and this is the part that always worries me, they have the trappings of Catholicism. Very often there's a sign outside saying Misa en Español. Of course, it's not the Missa as we know the Missa to be, but it is a service that sort of parodies in some ways the Mass itself. Some of them go even farther, because I have been in one, which someone said, you better go look at that place, where they had a picture of the Holy Father, which I thought was very nice, except that on the other wall there was a picture of me, the Archbishop, and I thought that was going a little too far. So I asked him to remove at least that picture, and he was nice enough to do that. But anyway, so those are the two things that we meet in today's world, beside the ordinary run-of-the-mill places that we run, and that the mainline Protestant churches run. The MegaChurch, looking for a huge congregation, very expensive to operate, but very costly in everything that's done, and gathering, because of generosity of people, enormous amounts of money, which they would need to continue to keep that operation going. The Storefront Church, in the community, basically part of the community, people who love the Lord and are looking for a chance to be with the Lord together, a church in which people would know each other and hopefully try to help each other, but a small community. I think of my own parish at home in Manhattan. This goes back now, 60 years or more. It was an Irish, Italian, Jewish parish. The neighborhood would have probably been 45% Irish, 45% Jewish, 10% Italian. I don't think we knew Protestants until we were in high school. They were there, but they were very quiet and well-behaved, unlike the rest of us. They were large, self-contained neighborhood churches. The interesting thing is, as I think you know in Boston, when people would say, where are you from? You'd say, I'm from Incarnation Parish. And the wonderful part of Manhattan, as I grew up there, Jewish people would say the same thing. Because they'd say, where are you from? Well, we're from Incarnation Parish. We're not Catholic, but we're from Incarnation Parish. Because the parish was so powerful a moment, so powerful an instrument in that whole understanding of a neighborhood. These parishes were the school-centered, school-dominated. We had 1,700 students in my grammar school. There were 2 sessions, morning and afternoon. We sat 3 in a seat, and I usually sat in the middle, because I was littler than most of them. And there was a beautiful, brilliant girl on one side and a sort of dumb boy on the other, and I made the mistake of copying from the dumb boy, usually, and therefore almost had to do 1A over again, until they said, no, you copy from the girl, not from the boy. Then I realized how to do this. We were priest-dominated, no question about that. The nuns controlled the school, however. The priests wouldn't dare make any decisions with regard to the school. There were 5 priests in the parish, a pastor and 4, of all age ranks. It was 28 years before a man got a parish, unlike what it is today. There were 22 nuns in the convent, and they would walk in their flowing robes with their bonnets on. They were Sisters of Charity of Mount St. Vincent. They using the old Mother Seton habit, and they would leave 15 minutes before the bell rang and walk the 4 blocks, and they'd walk in parade. Everyone would stop, and people would come out of their stores and wave to them. The sisters would nod graciously as they passed by. It was a different day. It was a different kind. The preaching was good, but not great. The mission band would come maybe once a year, and they were wonderful. And everybody compared them to the priests of the parish, to the detriment of the priests of the parish, so the priests were always glad to see them go. The parish was comfortable in its ministry. Vocations were regular. You didn't have to talk about them. They came. Maybe they came because the sisters pushed them. The sisters were always saying to the boys, you're going to be priests, and the girls, you're going to be sisters. We always had, in my class in the seminary, there were 4 from that parish. I was the only one ordained, the others didn't go through, but that was it was an understanding that you had to consider a priestly vocation when you went there. The lay people only had roles in the parish societies, the Holy Name, the Children of Mary. There were no councils or anything like that, but they were very, very fervent and very mass abiding. The wonderful thing about the priests is that they're always available. There was no such thing as office hours, as later on became the pattern in the Church of the United States. You could knock on the door of the priest at 6 o'clock in the morning and someone would come down. 10 o'clock at night and someone would come down. The priests were always there. The care of the poor was really only the local poor. The priests were always there for them, but they were very rarely you'd have a collection for some disaster outside of the area. It was an area-centered, a neighborhood-centered church, and maybe anytime the bishop came, it was a big deal for us all, but the bishop rarely asked us for anything, or at least if he did, the pastors never told us that he asked us for anything. It was a church that was happy, enthusiastic, proud of its school, proud of its building, liking its priests, awed by its sisters. The most influential layperson was probably the parish housekeeper. And she ruled the inside of the rectory, unless the pastor was a crank. What happened to that parish? I'm going to say that it doesn't exist anymore. Why? Well, I have 5 M's for you. Because of migration, because of money, and I have to apologize for this word, because of manpower. I could have said woman power, but it would have changed my alliterations. So if you excuse the manpower just for this talk, because of new mentality and because of the media. These were the major factors why those parishes don't exist anymore. First of all, there's been this tremendous migration inside and outside the cities. Because of that, most of our parishes are not where the people are. Most of the big churches are not where the big crowds are. And because of that, there is always the struggle in the inner city. Do you keep a parish open because it is a light to the neighborhood, even if it's expensive? Do you keep a parish open if it is able to be a sign of the fact that the church has not left? But then how do you support it? How do you keep it going? So that's been a problem, and I know it's been a problem in Boston. It's been a problem everywhere, and everywhere the bishop tries to see what can be done, how the work of the church can continue. And in each place, because of different circumstances, different decisions are made. But the migration of the Catholics to the suburbs, and sometimes the migration into those inner cities by Catholic groups like our Hispanic people, causes this rupture, this difficulty. How do you take care of your major Catholic population, which moves out into the country where there are no great parishes, and you have to build them? And yet, how do you take care of the Hispanics who come in, or the other Orientals who come in, or our African American people who are there? How do you take care of them at the same time? And of course, with schools, it is the same thing. How oftentimes you would wish to pick up a school building and put it 20 miles out into the country where people are crying for a Catholic school. But these are all the problems, and this is why the parishes that I spoke about, parishes of my youth, maybe don't exist anymore. Secondly, there's the question of money. The city parishes don't have it anymore, unless they are parishes which now exist in a suddenly, newly established shopping center downtown. And that happens from time to time. That's why bishops say, I don't want to sell that property, because it could come back. Someone asked me to buy a school about 2 years ago, and I said no. They said, well, you're not using it now. I had it, it was closed. I said, but you know how things change. Tomorrow I could be filled with Catholic people there. So it is always a thing, you have to make those judgments. You have to guess. And you get everybody together and you figure out all the pros and cons, and when it's all done, you guess. Because you don't know how all the variables are going to end up deciding what you should do. Of course, when I say the money isn't there in the inner city, you go out into the country where parishes are now, and there's money not there either. Because most of those people are highly mortgaged. Most of those people are paying off houses, they're paying off all kinds of things. And we'll talk in a little while about mentality. They're paying for more dancing lessons and singing lessons and guitar lessons than we ever thought of in the old days. The difficulty that we face, the middle class expenses in those suburbs make a difference, and it make a difference to the parish and the parish life. So migration and money, and then, excuse the word, manpower. A shortage of priests, younger priests and older priests, sometimes with different ideologies, sometimes with different ways of looking at life, making parishes not necessarily as efficient as they could have been if everybody thinks the same way and everybody works the same way and everybody works together in keeping everything going. Scandal, we've had it throughout the United States, that has caused difficulties in parishes. People say, I don't want to go there anymore. I'm going to look for another place. I'm not going to go anywhere now. I'm going to wait till this passes. Bishops have heard all these comments along the road, as you have too. So the difficulty with manpower. And the difference in years of preparation that we have, and that these great preachers in the MegaChurches, or these beautiful little fellows and women who take care of the Storefront Churches, it takes us, 6, 7 years to educate a priest. It takes maybe 6 or 7 weeks to educate the minister who's going to be in charge of the Storefront Church, or the minister who is even going to present himself as the preacher. That kind of talent you don't learn in the 6 or 7 years. Too bad, it would be great. But those are problems too that affect where we can go and what we can do. The years of study, which we have and others don't have, means that it takes us longer to get someone ready to do what that person has to do. Migration, money, manpower, and then mentality. The cultural revolution of the 60s was not just felt in China. It was felt here in the United States. Those of you, I'm the only one old enough to remember them, but those of you who were sort of around in those days know that the 60s were a time when many things were changed. And among the things that were changed were the fact that people stopped going to church. They estimate that when I was a boy, about 75% of Catholics went to church every Sunday. Now we're down to 25, maybe lower in some parts of the country, maybe a little higher in others. But that makes a difference. It affects the whole, it affects what you can do, it affects what the church can do, it affects what the church is all about. It affects certainly vocations, because if people aren't going to church, then their families are not going to be producing vocations. The 60s also gave us the beginning of a contraceptive culture, where people are not open to life anymore. They're open to pleasure, but not open to responsibility. When Pope Paul VI issued Humani Vitae, how many people thought that he was antediluvian and he was taking a step backward. But when he predicted that what that would do to families, what that would do to the institution of marriage, when he predicted what that would do to society itself, he was right. And it's only now that we're really seeing what happens when a contraceptive culture takes over a world. Within a few years, the population of France, the population of Germany, the population of Italy, the population of Spain will probably be more Muslim than Christian, because the Christians are not having the children now. And as you look at Europe, you see this happening. It is something that is so painful for the Holy Father, because he is a European at heart, and he hates to see this happen in all the great churches that were the great missionary churches, too, of the church, of the Catholic community in the old days. And now we are seeing these great countries with their great churches and their great history begin to disappear as the population level falls beyond 2.1 and is no longer able to provide for what is needed for the future. In the United States, we may see the same thing, but we see it here counteracted, counterbalanced by the tremendous group of immigrants that come in. And the church, of course, has been very blessed by the Hispanic immigration, legal and illegal, documented and undocumented, but it has kept our economy going, it has kept our industry going, it has kept our churches alive to take care of these new people who are coming in. Migration, money, manpower, mentality. The absence of the schools now in many parishes where if I had to close schools, we ought to close schools, has made the parish no longer so central as an instrument of the church. In the old days, when every family had someone in the school, the parish was important. You wanted to be part of that. It was part of your life. The youngsters went to the Catholic school and they would talk about the priests and the sisters and what they had learned. Nowadays you have maybe 1 hour of catechetical instruction and it's not the same. What a challenge that is for all of us. We're talking with the president of Boston College today, and I was so happy to see his grappling with it and Tom's grappling with it, and the need to develop catechetical programs and the need to form catechetical ministers in this area and throughout our country. But how important this is, because without it, little by little, the image of the church begins to blur, and the work of the church begins to diminish. And we cannot have that happen, because the church is the salvation of this area and of the world. And then finally, the media. The media really doesn't like us, because we are for life, we're for family, and we're for values. The media really doesn't like us. And so the media makes light of going to church or the positions that we hold. And because of that, in many cases, the people feel moved away from active Catholic life because they want to be with it, whatever it is supposed to be that you are to be with. So that's what happened to that parish of mine of 60, 70 years ago. Migration, money, manpower, mentality, and the media. Well, let's get to the real heart of what I want to talk about. And it's, what's a parish anyway? Why is a parish necessary? There's been a wonderful change in canon law, as many of you who are smarter than I am will know. In the old days, before the second code of canon law came out in the 1980s, the parish was looked at as an institution with territoriality. In other words, it was a place, and an institutional place where the church was served and where the church would take care of things. After the new code came out, there was a change. Now, the code speaks of the parish as a community. Not so much a locality, but a community. A community of the faithful, a community of people who believe, a community of those who practice their faith, a community of the faithful. And so it's different now than it was before. This is as a result, really, of the Second Vatican Council and of the teaching of the Council. And so what is a parish? First of all, it's a place to gather. A place to sense being part of a larger entity. A place where you can feel the unity of the faith that you have. If you didn't have a parish, where would you go to be a Catholic? If you didn't have a parish, where would you go to live a Catholic life? Where would you go to plug in to the faith, to plug into the sacraments, to plug into all that is part and parcel of who we are as Catholic Christians? So the parish is that place where the community gathers, that place where you feel at home, that place where you have the sense that you are not alone in your practice of the faith. Secondly, it's a place to worship. The old Greek word for liturgy, lighton ergon, is a public work. That's what liturgy is. It's a public work. We are, as we all know, and you know better than I from your theology, we are not only to worship God as individuals, but we have to worship Him as a corporate body, as a community. And the parish is the place where we do that. So it's a place to worship. Not that we shouldn't worship outside, not that we shouldn't pray always and wherever we are, but there is a place where the Lord wants us to come so that together as individuals we may pray. A place to worship, to do public worship. It's also a place for the sacramental life of a community. A place where babies are baptized. Sure, you could do it in your home, but it wouldn't be the same thing because you're bringing that child into a new life, and you need a new environment for that. A place where people marry. You could do that in your home too, but marriage is a sacred thing, and we all approach marriage with that sense of sacramentality. So it's a place where the sacraments are given to us. A place where you feel, yes, I'm going to be baptized, this is where I go. I'm going to be confirmed, this is where I go. I'm going to be married. From here I'll be buried. A place where there is holiness built into the surroundings and into what you do here. It's a place for Eucharist, both for the Mass and for adoration. A place where in a neighborhood you can come of an afternoon and go in and pray and know that the Lord is there. This wondrous mystery of the presence of God in our lives. And so every neighborhood needs that. And this is why 100 years ago, 150 years ago, the newcomers, the Irish, the Italians, the Poles, the Slovaks, they looked for a place where they could be with the Lord. And so they didn't have a tabernacle where the Blessed Sacrament could be, then they weren't safe, they weren't at home. But once they had that, then that was something which stabilized them, stabilized their family, their neighborhood, their place. And that's how it grew up around all our cities. A place for religious education and formation. Now, of course, it's the family that first teaches. But to find the teachers, to find how you teach, you go to the parish, you go to learn how to be a catechist, to learn how to to be a lector, to learn how to be someone who passes on the faith. And this is so important. This is for formation, not just education, but how do you become what you need to be? Where will you learn how to model your faith? But the parish. And finally, toward the end, a place to find the clergy and other church people. When you need someone to help you in one thing or another that has to do with the church, this is where you go. You go to the parish rectory, you go to the priest, you go to the religious educator, you go to the secretary, you go to someone who is a church person, and there so many of your problems are solved. And even more if you're a newcomer. How many times, when I was in parish, how many times the doorbell would ring, and it would be one of the migrants, one of the folks who could hardly speak English, looking for an answer. Not just a church answer, but a life answer. And this was the place they would go, because this is a place they knew was open for them, where they would be at home. And a place to serve the poor. A place where the poor could go, and where those could go who knew in their hearts they had to take care of the poor. And they would find out, where can I go to? Where can I bring this? Where can I bring that? Who needs a turkey? Who needs a lift somewhere? Who needs a doctor? And so the parish became and must become the center for all that activity to take care of the poor. And the poor must always be welcome there. And the poor know that they're welcome there. When I was a bishop in Harlem, that's where you'd go. The poor would always be there, because they felt at home in the parish. And not just to serve the poor, but for all the advocacy of the church, for all the things that the church needs, the parish is the place. Years ago, about 6-7 years ago now, the bishops of the United States issued a document called Communities of Salt and Light. And these were the challenges to all of us to develop in our parishes, not just the liturgy, as important as it is, but the social doctrine, the social action of the church. And the parish was there to tell people about it, to remind people that their neighbors are not just the families that live across the street, but they're families that live across the world. To open their eyes to the larger church, to the diocese, to the universal church, to the church in need, to the church in mission countries. All this is part of the need of a parish. Because a parish tells you who you are and what God wants you to do. A parish is there to challenge you, to help you, to instruct you, to form you, to let you know how much you're loved. Now, because of all these things, the parish really has to be both megachurch and storefront, doesn't it? It has to be big enough to make a difference, big enough to allow you to come in and feel at home, big enough so that you can see the power that it has to take care of poor people, the power that it has to make a difference even in political life, the power that it has to galvanize the gospel message and to make that gospel message heard. But at the same time, it's got to be like the storefront. You've got to know who your neighbors are. You've got to feel at home there. It can't be, and this is why someone was saying to me today, so often the megachurch brings thousands in and sends thousands out. Because people come for that one great experience, that great homily, that great sermon, that great music, that great show, that great theater, and it changes their lives for a while. But afterwards there's nothing, and so they leave. And unfortunately, so often, the experience of the megachurch can leave them without anything when they finish. And that, of course, is a great tragedy. Because having found something they thought was wonderful, and then when finding that it doesn't have all that they need, sometimes they don't go back to look for what they had before, but just walk away and say, in disappointment, I guess there's nothing there. And so we have to find something that can do all those great megachurch things and yet make people feel at home. How do you do that? Well, now I'm going to fly by the seat of my pants because you probably know better than I. But here are some thoughts, and maybe these are thoughts that you can mull over and see if they're useful in your own situations. If you're pastors or bishops, you have to do three things, I think. First of all, make sure that the seminarians are being formed for the church of today. And that's essential. Make sure that the new priests who are coming in know all these things that we've been talking about today. Know that the parish should be all these things, and that without it, it's not going to be able to really touch the lives of the people. So that's number one. If you're a bishop or a pastor, you also have to make sure that the laity are prepared and formed and challenged for their roles. We were saying to someone tonight, the church is 99.9% lay people. And they have a role that is important. Not a role that a pastor can give them, but a role that God has given them. Because they are part of that royal priesthood of Jesus Christ. And it is that royal priesthood they must exercise. And they must exercise it in all these ways that we've talked about before. Not ever, the Holy Fathers would say, to blur the lines between what the priest must do and what the layman must do, but keeping those lines always as they should be, to try to make sure that each side does everything that they must do in order to be fully, totally the friend of God, the perfect friend, the one who keeps the church alive and well and serving the Lord. And thirdly, if you're a priest or a bishop, to make sure that you have pastoral councils and finance councils that are working. It has been 45 years since we began to use pastoral councils in parishes and financial councils in parishes. I wouldn't want to be caught hanging, well, we counted all those parishes that don't have them yet. And how important this is for a parish. How important this is for the lay people to say, this is something we have to have. Father, you have to do this. Because this is important for the church. This is why this is not just a happy suggestion. This is a canonical responsibility of every parish. But now that we know what bishops and pastors have to do, what do all of us have to do? Well, I think to recommit ourselves to the church and our community. I know there are some people who say, well, I don't really belong to a parish. I just go where the Spirit moves me. Well, I think the Spirit, if you're really watching Him, the Spirit's moving you to a parish. Because not only can you be helped there and challenged there, but you can do so many good things for other people there. Your role in the parish is not just to sit by and be entertained like you are, like if you went to a megachurch. Your role in the parish is to play some role there, is to do something, to find some way, even if it's just being a minister of hospitality. I shouldn't say even such, that could be very hard to do. Or it's to serve on councils, or it's to be a lector, to be an usher, or to offer to have in your own home, once in a while, a Bible group, or a group of Renew International. I'm very proud of it. It started in the Archdiocese of Newark, and I know it's beginning in this Archdiocese, and I think that is so important because it will help to form the small groups that are like the the little churches on the street, which can, in line with the parish itself, be signs of life. We can all help create community in the parish, even in a large parish. We can all reach out to people and make them welcome. I talked about minutes of solidarity. We can develop stewardship programs in the parish. There is this wonderful church in Wichita, I guess it's still going, where nobody pays anything for anything, even high school, because they tithe. They tithe perfectly. Everybody who's a member of that parish tithes 10%, right down the line. And because of that, they have a school that's without tuition, a high school that's without tuition. They have all kinds of wonderful things that are totally without tuition because the people are already paying for it. We dream, pastors dream of parishes like that. But they're there. Not many of them. But that's what we have to work toward. That kind of tithing mentality. I read once that years ago, Catholics gave 2.8% of their income to the church or to charity, and Protestants gave 2.6%. And that now Protestants are giving 2.8%, and Catholics are giving 1.7%. I don't know if those figures are accurate, but the reality is that we are not as generous as we used to be, and it's making a difference in what we can and cannot do. Time, talent, and treasure. Those are the three things that stewardship is about. That's what you can do in a parish. Because you all have talents. Every one of us does. You all have, and we can make time. And we have some amount of treasure. And to make that available in a parish, if everybody did that, you'd have Wichita all over again. Then to develop apostolic programs. To take and read that Communities of Salt and Light and see all the things that the church is recommending for us to do. To take care of the poor. To take care of the Bible. To take care of the unconnected. There are so many unconnected people, so many lonesome people in the parish. To look out for them. Someone told me the other day they had gone to Peru and someone got ill. And while they were there, 2 evangelical church people would come every day to see how that person was. And that person left and went back to the United States. What did they do? They became an evangelical because they were there to help. Not the hardest thing to do when you have a parish of thousands of people, but the opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life. And then to surface and encourage religious vocations. 99.9% of our church is lay, but that 1/100th or whatever, 1,000th or 1,000,000th or whatever it is necessary, because we're a sacramental church, and the church must continue to be a Eucharistic community, and so we need the priests. We need the vocations. And if they don't come from parishes, they don't come from anywhere. How very few, in all my years of looking for vocations, how very few there are who come in off the street and say, I want to be a priest. The vast majority come from the parish because they have found there a place of refreshment, light, and peace, and the challenge to bring others to it. Another thing we can do, and I'm coming to the end now, I'm going beyond my time, is to invite the movements into your parish. Now, sometimes we're afraid of the movements because they're not exactly like us. But the movements can be very, very powerful instruments of God's presence. I believe the movements are a work of the Holy Spirit in our time. And even as from the beginning of the church we had monastic vocations, and Then we had the friars and the Franciscans and the Dominicans. And then we had the Jesuits at the time of the Reformation. And then we had the Vincentians, the missionary orders in the 19th century. Now we have these groups of movements of lay people, the Focolarini, the Communion Liberation, the Neo-Catechumenate. There are many groups like this which are open to life and open to love, and I see miracles as I watch them. We should not be afraid of them. We should invite them into the parish, and they will give us more life. They'll challenge the rest of us to be as good as they are. To develop, finally, a sense of the diocese. I think, if I end with a story, when I was named Bishop of Metuchen, I was the first bishop, and there was we had been part of a diocese that was around for 100 years, a wonderful diocese of Trenton, but it had become. Don't ever tell anybody from Trenton I told you this. It had become sort of, well, this is what we do every day. It wasn't exciting at all. And I realized that we had to have excitement. And so that was when I started going around to all the parishes every day. And people started to say, we're Metuchen. And it began with T-shirts. T-shirts said Metuchen on it. And then collar shirts said Metuchen on it. And then people developed little badges that said Metuchen on it. And I knew we had made it when the Knights of Columbus had their 100th anniversary, and there were about 150 bishops in New Haven, Connecticut. And they came for this big meeting, and the Holy Father sent the Cardinal Secretary of State, Cardinal Casseroli, to be his representative there. I remember one of the sessions had ended, and we all went to the elevators to go up to our rooms, and I was in the back of the elevator, and a number of bishops were in, and all of a sudden Cardinal Casseroli appeared, so we all pushed back to let the Secretary of State in. He came in, and the Bishop of Yakima was there. I don't know who it was at the time. And the Cardinal said to him, where are you from? And he said, Yakima. And the Cardinal Secretary of State looked at me and said, oh, that's an Indian name, like Metuchen. And I said to myself, I went back, when I got back, and I put in my column, like Metuchen. And that's what we have to find. You have to find the enthusiasm of being in a parish, of being in a diocese, of being in a church, of being in the family of Jesus Christ. I don't know what the future is going to be, but I think we'll always have parishes, because we'll always have people who need a place to say, here I am, Lord, me and my friends, we're together. May all of us be that. Thank you very much.